This is Arts Alive. I'm Lynda Philippi, and my guest today is Joseph Stromme, and he is here to talk about his art in all of its many and varied guises. So, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Lynda. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I guess maybe we'll start out with what's most obvious, and that is your drawing, your pen and ink drawing.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got a couple hanging up here, and then a few that I just have here.
Okay.
This one is pretty recent, yeah, this is an all black and white one, obviously, and you can see I just kind of find a world on the page and just kind of create it into whatever I want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the primary focus is always kept on it being like a prayer to God, pretty much.
Okay.
So it's like an idea of pouring out to God as an idea of hoping for Him to lift me up then.
Okay.
And so it ends up being a lot of concepts, and a lot of them involve lament, which is like basically complaining to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so these...
very Old Testament.
Yeah, pretty much. Very influenced by like Ecclesiastes,
mm-hmm.
and also the book of Job and Lamentations.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, there's ends up being quite a few like frowning faces,
mm-hmm.
and but the whole thing to me is a very hopeful experience to be able to like look at it and draw it, and so. So yeah, I hope it's encouraging to people, when they see my art and stuff. And but this one, I like the experience of having depth, and that's something I end up being a little bit deliberate about and thinking about when I'm start planning a new piece. And I like the feeling of a lot of things on top of other things, and I kind of like the feeling of claustrophobic images.
Okay.
And so, I feel that a lot in this because, like, for instance, like this guy's face is popping up here, and there's like a formation of kind of like rocks or some kind of land, and then just a lot of different faces on top of other faces and such, and streets and tubes and buildings kind of behind things.
Well, and it's interesting because it's kind of, in some ways, it kind of reminds me of the old paintings, religious paintings, and there's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
In many of those paintings, there's a lot going on, and you have to keep looking, really deeply to see absolutely everything, and try to, sort of tease out all the little threads about, what the artist, had in mind when he started painting. And in this, it's like that in the way that it's sort of, I guess old school, but then kind of modern in a way. Like this is kind of cartoony almost,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think it definitely brings it into like the modern world, if you will.
Yeah, and like with what you said about cartoons, like I grew up, drawing from comic books a lot, and like my dream with art was always like someday I'll make a comic book, but I just never got to the point where like the idea of like doing a whole story arc and like page after page of the same
mm-hmm.
thing and having to like think about it in that way never really related to me. But then just in the last few years, I've kind of started thinking like, well, I can pretty much visually tell a story in just one piece.
Right.
And have one piece that sets the atmosphere as well as technical experience I'm looking to achieve. And so that's what I feel like I've accomplished with this style, and it's really satisfying for me just because I'm able to pretty much get what I want from art in doing this style, but I had to kind of think about it in my own way because I just really didn't want to make a comic book or anything.
One of the things I always think about when I look at the comic strip, I mean,
mm-hmm.
it looks pretty simple. There's the 3 little panels, and you think, okay, but in a way, can you imagine how boring it would be to draw the same dog
right.
or the same cat or that same person day after day after day after day, and it always has to look the same because, obviously people can't change, from one strip to the next, but I would think somehow to me, the idea of all that repetition, that would become kind of a, I don't know, buzzkill or something.
Some of the tedium, I think, would make it a little like, I'm not feeling like I'm putting my heart into it.
Well, it's not as, it doesn't feel like it's like your real creative burst. Like you've had this one great idea, now you just have to keep working it for the rest of your life. I don't know.
I feel like I want the fun part to happen always, pretty much.
So keep it. Do you usually find yourself doing sort of the like religious images or themes?
However it relates to me, pretty much, but never with any sort of like necessarily religious intents or anything like that. But it's just such a big part of my life, my relationship with God and stuff, so it comes through very well.
Okay.
But
and are you self-taught?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just I guess, you know, like everyone in like middle school, I had like an art class or something like that, but other than that, I just pretty much do my own thing. And growing up, I just always did it with, you know, ballpoint pens or like pencils and stuff like that. And then a couple years ago, a friend gave me one of these as a gift, and this Pentel color brush, and it, this one's just a black.
Okay.
And like the ink is in the bottom, and you know you squeeze that, and it refills the cartridge.
The ink you squeeze back here?
Yeah, yeah, and it refills it into the cartridge, cool is that? and then you know it's a brush with bristles, so.
So the control of a pen with the fluidity of a paintbrush.
Yeah, yeah.
I like it.
And it just it keeps me like, so I don't really have to think about a whole lot in terms of, you know, paint and like or like having the right pen size and stuff. This kind of just takes care of it all for me, being able to use these. And
because you can get the fine thing, or you can use it on its side and kind of get a broader stroke.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I have to kind of learn control over time. Like if you look at some of these like older ones, you can see a lot of the lines are, well, I mean, I'm happy with the way this turned out for the time for where I was at, but like this one is definitely much older than, say, like this one.
Okay.
And, you know, if you look at the lines, you can really see a difference there. Like, I think this one came out darker. And also I just see kind of a roughness around the lines and stuff, and I think I became more used and more comfortable with the brush.
Well, I think that happens as time goes on. You know, you become more proficient at what you're doing just because you've done it more, experienced.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's fun to feel it kind of grow over time, and then also feel ideas grow. And there's so many like parts to it, like the technical parts, atmospheric parts, you know. And so like over time I started introducing color into it, but I kind of see color differently than so much like, you know, because when I first started thinking about color, I was like, you know, what, I'm going to do this big drawing and I have to color it all in. That sounds like
color it all in. That's cute. Yeah, paint by number.
It's like, yeah, like I'm gonna get a coloring book out and doing all the lines or something. And so it just sounded kind of tedious. Like, and so I approached color differently in my mind because I wasn't happy with thinking about it in that way. So I had to think about it in terms of like the color being like its own expression, you know, and so that there's no reason for it necessarily to be more colorful than less colorful. So like it could be completely black and white and then just like one piece of color on it now. Like this one.
Kind of as an accent or?
Yeah, like this one's like completely black and white and then I just use red as the underline. And for some words, just to kind of like draw that out. And yeah, I feel better about doing it that way.
Okay. So have you shown your work someplace?
Yeah, at each week at Saturday Market.
Right. Okay.
I show it there, but I haven't brought it to like a gallery and anything. But I am kind of anxious to see what some, you know, go up to like Portland or something like that, or hang out at the Saturday Market there, see what people think. You know.
Well, tell me what kind of response you've had from the McMinnville Public Market.
I think it's been pretty positive.
Okay.
I've gotten in a lot of really encouraging conversations with artists. And those conversations tend to be more like intent or like emotional based, not so much like technical based. Like they'll show me, we'll talk about little technical things like pens I use and stuff, but it always tends to be more about like their inspiration for the art they make and you know, why I do what I do, kind of stuff like that.
So maybe more than just, we're seeing some images now from the market, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, and that's me in my booth doing a piece there.
Okay.
And I started that piece while he was filming me, and just was doing as much as possible, kind of. And it was fun kind of being put on the spot like that and trying to pull up a lot of ideas. So and it ended up being kind of cool. I was happy with the way it turned out.
Okay.
But I still haven't finished that piece yet, but
okay.
We'll see what happens.
Well, that was a particular mood that was going on right then, too, a certain energy. So you have to get back into that kind of space to finish it up, I would imagine.
Yeah, sometimes that can be kind of true. Like, you start something and then set it aside, and then when you come back to it, it doesn't really make as much sense. So it seems like my pieces turn out a little better when I concentrate on them one at a time. But, you know, I end up kind of more like concentrating on them like 4 at a time or something.
And you're able to do that? That doesn't, I mean, you can work that way?
Yeah, as long as I keep touching base with them, you know, continually, at least like once a day or something, and do a little bit on them, then, you know, I don't really like lose my focus of what I wanted originally for it. But, you know, sometimes what you want originally ends up changing to something very different, and you end up with an atmosphere you completely didn't expect. So that's a good process too.
I've heard a lot of artists say that you know, when they say, okay, it's time to paint, gonna paint, or draw, or whatever it's gonna be, you know, sort of hit the studio and just wait to see what happens. That you don't necessarily, you might have an idea of what you think you want to do, but it doesn't always work out that way, because from out of left field or your right brain or whatever comes the image, I guess, that you're meant to paint that day. Yeah,
yeah, and I think in general a lot of it feels more like finding. Like, you know, like with an image is suffocated feeling is this. Like, I look at it now, and to me personally, it all kind of goes together, and I really feel an atmosphere and a feeling about this one. But like, also at the same time, I know that everything on there I kind of found, you know, just by like. By just doing it, and just by like being like, okay, what do I want to see next? What do I want to see next? What do I want to see next? But those ideas are marrying together as you're doing it, because I might do one idea, like my first idea is like, you know, okay, I want to see this guy, he's muscly, and he's got like veins on his face. For some reason, he's got like a cyclone body that's like a tornado or something.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see that.
And then, you know, then my next, you know, thing is like, well, what do I want to marry to that idea? And so then, you know, that turns into something else. And then I just keep perpetuating that idea over and over again until it's like all full of stuff. And, but, you know, obviously they don't always end up quite as claustrophobic, because like this one stayed, I don't know, it just felt comfortable that the space I'd used, I didn't want to fill it all in really. You know, sometimes the white feels comfortable in the back, and sometimes it feels less comfortable, and then you end up like, more like, okay, well, I better fill it all in with black, you know.
Okay.
It just kind of depends on the piece, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. This kind of is maybe, I guess what I thought when I first looked at it, I thought, well, maybe it's not as complicated because the color. You know, so the color adds that extra dimension, so that you didn't need maybe so much complexity, because I think, you know, color sort of exudes emotion and brings forth different feelings. So, but what is that black thing up at the top? Do I know, or is that just a thing?
Yeah, I agree. This one does have a lot more color-based ideas, and yeah, this is this to me is like a funnel, and it seems like it's kind of branching off from a piece of this guy's hair, but it's kind of its own thing, and it's opening up, and then you're seeing the inside of it, and this is being sucked into it. And to me, this is kind of like a curtain. And every time I look at it, I think of something kind of regal, just like, which makes me think of like a movie theater or something like that. And look kind of like a drape or something, and maybe just because of the purple.
Maybe, yeah.
And then that leads down into like what to me feels like an organ or something.
Yeah, like a giant exposed brain or something.
Yeah, basically, and like with the texture of lines, and it does seem kind of like a brain, and then like this is like falling from that and dripping down. And everything's just branching out into other ideas.